All right, man, peace. You know, brothers, one thing that I've learned definitively in life is that even though it can be fun to go down memory lane and become nostalgic about certain people, places, and experiences from the past, everything ends how it ends for a reason. So it makes no sense to try to reverse engineer your life. Everything happens for a reason. Why am I saying all this? Because, as usual, it's the 20th anniversary of a certain sports event. And whenever anniversaries come up, people like to play the what if game. In this edition of the what if game, they're asking Scottie Pippen, what do you think would have happened had the Chicago Bulls not been broken up after the second three-peat? Now, for those of us who lived through it and watched it happen, even though as an adolescent, the Chicago Bulls dynasty of the mid to late 90s proved to be an indelible portion of my life at that time and everybody who grew up during that era. It was almost like a dream when it came to an end so suddenly, even though you were being prepped for it, not just that season, but the season before, because everybody knew that Reinsdorf and Krause wanted to end that dynasty early, based off of the supposition that the Boston Celtics did not sufficiently cut the cords on their title-winning teams of the 1980s early enough, allowing Larry Bird and Kevin McHale and those guys to get old, and supposedly that's the reason why they were not competitive into the 1990s. That's a whole different story, because the fact of the matter is that the reason why the Boston Celtics struggled in the 1990s is because of Len Bias and also Reggie Lewis. But once again, that's a whole other video for another day. The point being is that oftentimes we're asked what would have happened if Jordan and Pippen and Rodman and Phil Jackson had come back for one more year. As we all know, the season after 1998 was a strike-shortened season. They played a 50-game schedule. And the San Antonio Spurs were able to win their first championship that season, the year after Michael Jordan retired. Would the Bulls have been able to sneak in one more championship had they not been broken up? Of course, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
January 13th, the 20th anniversary of Michael Jordan's second retirement following the second Bulls three-peat. Hey, there were 3 retirements. Let's take a stroll down memory lane and reminisce how it unfolded.
17 seconds from Game 7 or from championship number 6. Jordan open. Chicago with the lead. Who knows what will unfold in the next several months?
That was one of the most unbelievable plays to watch in real time. I mean, this play gets replayed so much over and over and over again that you become anesthetized to it. But watching it in real time, live, it was unbelievable. It was like everything was going in slow motion as a viewer. So when Jordan stated that things started to happen in slow motion for him, I could believe it. Because as a viewer, it seemed to be happening in slow motion when he stole the basketball from Karl Malone and then brought the ball down. I was like, am I really watching this? Did this guy just steal the ball from Malone and then make the game-winning jump shot to pretty much seal the game? It was unbelievable. It's one of the great sequences in the history of championship-level basketball. Because they were down 3 with about 41 seconds left. And Jordan makes a quick layup, you know, where somebody tried to strip him, and somehow he held on to the basketball. Then he comes up behind Karl Malone and strips Malone, and then makes this shot. It was truly unbelievable. It really took me a second to process exactly what the hell I was watching at the time.
But that may have been the last shot Michael Jordan will ever take in the NBA.
We do this again for the second time. I am here to announce my retirement from the game of basketball. From a career standpoint, I've accomplished everything I could as an individual.
This is my 5th time. I do it 6, 7, 8 times. Yeah.
My love for the game is very strong, and it's hard to give up that love, but this is a perfect time for me to walk away from the game.
Now, when Michael Jordan states that his love was very strong for the game, he's talking about his addiction. He was a competition addict, and basketball allowed him to have an outlet for his addiction to competition.
The game. I'm at peace with that.
No, he was never at peace with it. The only reason why he retired in 1998 was because pretty much in his mind he was forced out. So when he retired, that was his version of calling Jerry Krause's bluff. Even that was a competition for him because he did not want to retire. He wanted to keep playing until they lost. See, when people talk about how Michael Jordan was 6 for 6 in the finals, of course that's something that he brags about today. But he looked at competition in basketball like a samurai. He wanted to go out on his sword. He didn't want to retire being 6 for 6 at that time in real time. He actually wanted to be knocked out.
So, Scottie, the 20-year anniversary of all that is this weekend. We're not going to be hanging out with you this weekend, so we're going to ask you today. Right. We wanted to kind of find out from you, what do you think would have happened if MJ hadn't walked away? Because the truth is, he did play basketball after this.
Yes.
He didn't know that he would want to play again at that moment, but it turns out he did want to keep playing. So what would have happened if after that title, I can hear all the Utah people, he pushed off. If after that...
Yeah, all that's such silly shit. But yes, Jordan wanted to keep playing, and that's no secret. That's no real revelation. He pretty much said that in the press conference for his second retirement, that he wanted to keep playing. But there are a couple of issues. First off, Michael Jordan played the entire 1997-98 season with a broken index finger on his shooting hand. That's why his shooting percentage went down to about 46.5%, which was the lowest of his career up to that point. Please keep in mind, 46.5% is about the highest that Kobe Bryant ever shot in a season for his career. So once again, when we're trying to compare Michael Jordan to Kobe Bryant, there is no comparison. And no one really knew about the extent of the injury until he appeared at the press conference for his retirement, where he had that cast on his index finger. That's when he told the press that, yes, my finger was broke. It was broke the whole season. See, Michael Jordan was not like LeBron James. He didn't go and wrap his wife's scarf around his shooting hand so that he would have an excuse for why he lost in the finals, why he got swept. He played through it, and he assisted his team in transcending whatever obstacles they had to deal with. And then you happen to find out that he was hurt by happenstance. It wasn't some type of a press release.
After that happened, you guys all had expiring deals. You, MJ, Rodman,
Phil.
Phil obviously was expiring as per Jerry Krause. But I know that Phil was leaving, but if MJ had come back to you and said, you know what, I want to go at least one more year, maybe a couple, what would you have done? What do you think would have happened?
Well,
They would have had a chance to win a championship, but it would have been very tough to play 50 games in between January. I believe that they played a 50-game schedule in between January and April. Like, it was a very packed NBA schedule, if I remember correctly. If I'm wrong about that, one of you brothers can correct me, but I believe they didn't start playing until early January. And it was a 50-game schedule. And the New York Knicks actually went on a magic carpet ride run to the finals in 1999. Really, to me, the only question would have been, would Jordan, Pippen, and Rodman have come back from that previous season in the conditioning that they would have needed to get off to the start necessary to make another title run? And would Jordan's index finger have healed up appropriately enough after the operation for him to still be a great enough shooter from the mid-range to still be a dominant force? And also keep in mind that he was going to turn 36 that year. After you get to be 34, 35, 36 in one season, your proficiency can drop off, your athleticism can drop off precipitously. So who knows how he would have looked that year. I do believe that things end for a reason. And am I going to touch on the arcane aspect of the Bulls dynastic run? There's no doubt in my mind that Phil Jackson was an MK handler, a so-called Zen Buddhist, dealing with the occultic aspects of MK handling. Michael Jordan was an MK asset. I'll be dealing with that in another video down the line once I get all of the data that I want to provide in that video. And Jerry Krause and Jerry Reinsdorf were, without a doubt in my mind, Kabbalists. You could tell by their movements. And they have to end things according to certain numerological events, so on and so forth. But once again, that's a video for another day. But there's no doubt in my mind that the Bulls would have been serious title contenders in 1999 had they all come back or had they all been brought back.
I think all along we all wanted to continue to play together. We wanted to keep that nucleus together. But we were informed that, this was going to be our last season. So, we just made the best of it. But, had we had the chance to continue on and keep the same players that we had, I think the sky's the limit for us.
Do you think if
that would have been a great finals in 1999, the Bulls versus the Spurs? It would have almost been like, a turning over of the throne. Could the old king hold on to his kingdom, or could the incumbent king finally knock him off? Because the Spurs have pretty much been the standard for borderline greatness for the past 15 or 16 years. I've never considered them a great team per se. They've had great teams in individual seasons, but they're not dynastic. And sometimes the Spurs fans, they get upset by that and they try to go back and forth. They've won 5 championships in 15 years. They've never won back-to-back titles. They're not a dynasty. They do have a transcendent player in Tim Duncan. But that would have been a very, very, very competitive finals because the Bulls never had to match up with a team that had 2 great centers like that or center-type players. So how would they have been able to attack the middle? The Bulls played the Spurs twice in the 97-98 season. They beat them twice. In the first game, Pippen didn't play. And it was actually like a double overtime game that ended in the high 70s. That's how defensive that era was. And Tim Duncan is on record as stating that before the game, he was vomiting because he was so nervous to face Michael Jordan for the first time. Jordan shot terribly in that first game in Chicago, but his defense was nonpareil. It was nonpareil. There was a moment where he literally guarded 3 guys at once and got the steal. And Dennis Rodman and Tim Duncan went to war for rebounds. They both ended the game with something like 23 rebounds. It's a phenomenal game. It's on YouTube. I believe that there's an extended cut of about 18 minutes that you can view. That first game I'm talking about. They played again in San Antonio later on, and Jordan was just dominant. Scored about 33, 34 points, and was slashing to the basket at will, finishing over Tim Duncan, over David Robinson, etc. at 35 years old. But that 1 year difference could have been all the difference that they needed. Now, the Spurs did not have a great backcourt. I think they had Avery Johnson in the backcourt. I'm trying to remember who the other guard was. I think it was Del Negro. They also had Sean Elliott, who was a very, very talented 3-man at the time, and also the great Tim Duncan, and a David Robinson who was slightly on the decline but was still a dominant defensive player and a very good offensive player. And they would have faced off, of course, against Jordan, Harper, Pippen, Rodman, and Longley, hypothetically. So that would have been a very good finals. I probably would have picked the Bulls in 7.
I think if you and Michael had wanted to stay with the Bulls, Jerry Krause would have said no thank you. Jerry Reinsdorf would have said, nah, it's okay, it's time to break it.
I kind of felt like that was a situation that we wanted to stay.
Exactly, that's the point. The reason why Jerry Krause and Jerry Reinsdorf drove off Phil Jackson, that was their way of saying, we don't want you guys here either. Because if they wanted them to stay, then they would have kept Phil Jackson. That's the whole point. That's like somebody telling your mother, we don't want you here. That also means that you don't want us here because we're a package deal. That's what they were trying to communicate. But it was time for them to go anyway.
But it was looked at that they were picking out pieces. Phil wasn't going to no longer be there. That they feel like that it wasn't going to be the same.
I mean,
and think about this. They won a championship, and they looked at us and said, nah, we good, yo. Thanks, Scottie. Thanks for the memory.
A championship. They won their 6th championship.
Yeah, that's kind of...
But it was one of those seasons where we knew we could have won 50 games. No other team would have had the advantage that we had
Right.
because we were already...
had to feel...
Well, it was a 50-game season, so y'all was not going to win 50 games. But I could have seen y'all going maybe like 36-14 or something like that. But that was a very compacted schedule.
Feel that if you had stayed together, even without Phil, if Jerry Krause and Phil couldn't work it out and Phil left, as he did, if you and Michael had wanted to come back and play for that team, you tell me the truth, you think you would have won the next year's title?
Right, but what does that question really mean? Once again, they were not going to come back without Phil Jackson. They were a package deal. They wasn't going to play for Tim Floyd. That would have been, in Jordan's mind, that would have been him acquiescing to Jerry Krause and letting Jerry Krause believe that he's the one who's winning these championships because he can bring in new coaches whenever he wants and the players have to capitulate. Jordan was not going to do that. Once again, that was a competition thing for Jordan. That's why he retired, because he felt like he was competing with Jerry Krause for supremacy of that organization. Who was going to get the most credit for the dynasty?
I definitely think we'd have won the title. I just don't think that the organization had it in their eyes to keep that team together.
Also, you forgot.
No, they were trying to be like Golden State, we're light years ahead of everybody else, and they ended up being light years behind everybody else. You just don't replace a Michael Jordan and a Scottie Pippen. You just don't.
You forgot Steve Kerr left. He went to San Antonio and won a ring there.
Well, he was signed. He was. I mean, once this, I have the whole list here. Michael Schwartz gave me the whole list. Yeah, you've got sign and trade Luke Longley to the Suns, Steve Kerr to the Spurs. Scottie, I had totally forgot until this was put in front of me. You were sent to the Rockets first before going to Portland. I had kind of
That's right. Scottie Pippen went to join him with Hakeem Olajuwon and Charles Barkley. And Charles Barkley's bum ass tried to act like they were going to be some type of super team. And Scottie got there, and he quickly realized the difference between Charles Barkley and Michael Jordan, and why Charles never won a ring, because Charles was not a hard worker, at least nowhere near as hard as he tried to act like he was. He did not work hard enough to win a championship. That's why Charles Barkley never won. Because I'll give him the excuse in 93, of course, you're going against Jordan. But 94 and 95, you can't beat the Rockets one time. You up 3-1, you could not finish them off. That's a leadership issue.
Kind of mind erased that until
He got a nice deal too.
I know he got
it's
his,
like, that's a back end, right? Like you played so long with Chicago, underpaid, and then you went to Houston. Like
Scottie deserved it though. Unfortunately for Scottie, he was talked into signing, or at least he believed that it was in his best interest to sign a long-term contract when he was very young, because he was a country boy from Arkansas who never saw that type of money before. And I think the Bulls offered him something like $900,000 or $1 million a year for a 10-year contract, or some long-term contract he signed that he regretted. He wanted to renegotiate, and they said no. They were not going to renegotiate with him, because at that time you didn't operate according to good faith. You operated according to, you put your name on that contract, and that's that. And that's what started a lot of the bitterness between Scottie and the front office.
as you deserve.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
It was a great finish.
Yes, but I mean, it would have been nice to have another ring and that as well.
It would have been great. It would have been great for me to continue to play in Chicago. I probably would have retired had I got a couple more years in Chicago.
Well, you were the youngest.
I'm sure you would have. I think that in Michael's and Scottie's perfect world, they would have retired in 2000 with 8 chips. Nice round number, the year 2000, and that would have been that.
The youngest. So at the end, during that next season, you would have been 33. Well, you would have been. You were 33. MJ was 35, and Dennis, if he had stayed around, he would have been 37. So you guys still, I mean...
Yeah, Michael would have been turning 36 that year had he kept playing.
33 still alive.
that old?
Yeah. He's like, yes, he was. Plus, Dennis did a lot of living.
but I said,
His calendar was even old.
Dennis Rodman was a freakish athlete. I think he was 25 years old when he came into the NBA. He was a little older. But Dennis is another Monarch athlete and asset. And that one's so blatant that even regular people say, what's going on with Dennis Rodman and the CIA? He must work for them. Like, even regular people could see that one. Who the hell gets clearance to go back and forth to North Korea unless you're some type of asset for the CIA? So if he's an asset for the CIA, then the question begs to be asked, how far back do his associations with the CIA go?
Older.
his voice.
And now it's time to take a break.
But anyway, that's basically it on that. I thought that this was a very interesting topic. Scottie Pippen spoke about it the best he could, and he'd be the best person to ask because he lived it. So peace.